Welcome to the University of Maryland Robert H. Smith School of Business Energy Club podcast series. Our podcasts are designed to connect you, our listeners, to current issues in the industry and the employers targeting them. This podcast is part 3 of a multi-part series of interviews with Constellation Energy that we're airing in the spring of 2011. A Fortune 500 company, Constellation is a leading supplier of wholesale and retail energy products to electric and natural gas customers in the U.S. Constellation's fleet generates up to 12,000 megawatts of electricity, and the company saw revenues of over $14 billion in 2010. These interviews were conducted in the fall of 2010. Since our interviews, Constellation has made several acquisitions and continues to position itself as a leader in electricity generation and supply, as well as renewable energy solutions. For the most up-to-date information on the company, as well as employment opportunities, we encourage you to visit Constellation's website at www.constellation.com. Thanks for joining us, and now for our interview. I'm Kristen Thompson, and this week we wrap up our interview with Andrew Good, Senior Vice President of Constellation's Corporate Strategy and Development Team. We conclude our conversation by exploring the implications of policy on Constellation's business strategy, as well as take a look at career opportunities for MBAs. In many of the cases we've talked about, government incentives or policy have played an often significant role in shaping development. Can you talk more about how Constellation develops its strategy given the changing nature of government incentives and policy?
Sure. So we refer to this as regulatory risk, and some locations it's fairly extreme. So California is a very challenging market because they do have a very active and interventionary state regulatory framework that wants to direct very specific outcomes with respect to their energy policy. And as a result, we actually don't do much in California because of that risk. We're not sure what's going to happen year to year. We continue to work with the California regulators. We try to influence by educating the regulators on consequences, kind of how the market's working and what would be consequences of various decisions. So we try to remain influential there. But that would be an example of where you see maybe a lot of that regulatory risk. At the federal level, what it means is more about technology decisions. So you see this at the state and federal level. And by that I mean, as we look forward, and so broad numbers, if we look to, say, 2030, we see a variety of firms projecting out there that there's going to be a need for maybe 300 gigawatts of new generation. And so if you say, okay, so we've got to build a lot of new generation. If I look today as a developer, if I were to build a power plant, nothing looks economic on its own merits. Not gas, not coal, not wind, not nuclear, not solar, nothing looks economic. And so what happens is the only way to get something built today is there's some sort of incentive provided. Now, for renewables, it tends to be these state programs, these renewable portfolio standards, RPS, mandate that a certain amount of power delivered to customers in that state have to come from renewable generation sources. And if you can't meet that requirement, then you pay a very high, what's called an alternative compliance payment. And so that provides the incentive to go out and spend more money to build renewable energy sources, because if you don't, you'll have to pay the alternative compliance payment, and that's actually larger than the cost to build solar. So while the normal market mechanism wouldn't do it, these RPS standards are actually very influential. And those tend to be very long-term. So you'll notice states put out 2020 objectives, for example, so where they want the state to be by 2020. And that's a pretty long roadmap and helps firms like ourselves determine where to go and build renewable resources. It turns out wind and solar in particular, you can build them fairly quickly. By contrast, new nuclear is much more challenging. So it's not getting built on state level. It's a federal level energy policy issue. It takes 8 to 10 years to go through the entire process. So you need a much longer, firmer view of the support mechanisms that the government's going to provide to build new nuclear. But in some shape, manner, or form, the government provides incentives. The other big one are investment tax credits that you might read a lot about, where you can get 30% of the cost of the development up front in cash to help offset the costs.
What do you see as your greatest challenges moving forward in terms of servicing your clients, innovating, and the overall Constellation strategy?
The greatest challenge moving forward with our clients, I think it's a struggling environment out there. So the economy still hasn't kind of picked back up, I think, how everyone would have hoped it would have been. And so for a number of our customers, their energy bill is one of the largest, if not the largest bill. And so our challenge is working with them to figure out ways to help them better manage their costs. So whether it's how to just lower their energy bill, maybe we can provide them with offsets by working with them so that they can provide some demand response capability, such that in a very hot day, maybe in the summer, that they have the ability to turn off some of their machinery so that they can reduce their power demand, and we would pay them for that capability. And so we try to work with our customers, or maybe it's putting solar panels at their facility so they actually benefit from having the energy provided by the sun, which will reduce their ultimate power demands over time, and actually helps many of our clients want to become greener and more sustainable in their practices. And so that solution helps them achieve those goals as well. I think it's really trying to work through those. How do you work with customers today in what's a more environment or economically challenged perspective? How do you help them meet their economic and their environmental concerns? I think if I look back 3 years before all of this financial crisis, I think customers very much wanted to solve environmental issues and wanted to become greener, and we're actually had the economic capability to pay a little bit more for their energy bill to do so. I think we're finding that that's more challenging in today's environment.
So, Andrew, I'd like to wrap this up with a question specific to MBAs. Many of our listeners are enhancing their skills for employers such as Constellation. What kind of roles do MBAs fill in your corporate strategy unit, as well as in your broader practices?
So I'll start with the corporate strategy group. MBAs, we're organized. I have a leadership team, so people who have been in the energy field for a long time, and someone focuses on generation, someone might focus on new energy, someone focuses on innovation, for example, and that's kind of the leadership team. But then I've got a pool of 8 to 10 analysts and associates, and this is where the MBAs come in, where what their job is, they're kind of the arms and legs workers on projects that we do. So whether it's development of the strategy, and so working with the business units, and so doing some of the modeling with that, or it's the mergers and acquisitions work. So when we go out and we do M&A activity, and we have to do a lot of modeling associated with that and a lot of working with the business units to make sure we thought about the various consequences or implications or concerns we might have or risks that we might have. And so the MBAs really take the lead in working through all of that stuff, and then we've got that leadership team kind of looking over their shoulder, training them and helping them to understand and double-checking, making sure that we thought about everything. So I think it's a great role. Quite frankly, it's one of the most popular jobs inside of our company, and really good MBAs. That's a target slot for them. More broadly, I would suggest that our company actually hires a lot of MBAs in kind of I think of it as two big ways. We've got commercial slots, and so these are people who are going to go out and they're going to try to originate transactions, meet with customers. So it's either commercial on an origination side, or what they might do is help us to manage our portfolio. So we've got a lot of, I mentioned NSTAR, so we've got now a bunch of load obligation or obligation to provide power to those customers over the next 3 years or something, and that requires day-by-day, really hour-by-hour monitoring and optimization of how we're going to provide that power to the customers, and so we call that function portfolio management, and some MBAs go in and work in that function as well, and that's, I think, one of the more exciting places in our company. We also have a significant need for MBAs in our finance, our risk groups, our treasury group, and so on, where we have a kind of constant need to bring new talent in and work them up through the organization.
And what kind of skills are you looking for in these professionals?
I'm actually a pretty simple guy in this. I think most people coming in, it's not like energy is generally a core knowledge segment in a university or something, so I'm not expecting that someone comes out with an energy degree. It's helpful if they've got some acquaintance with energy. But really, it comes down to people who are smart, can work hard, work on the right priorities, and then importantly, it took me 15 years probably to figure this out, but who can bring other people along with them. And so people who just think they're in a race and they're going to run and they want to get to the finish line first actually don't do as well because they get there and they're there by themselves. So we want people who can not only race hard, so work hard, smart, and on the right priorities, but can bring other people along so that when they get to that finish line, they're there and they brought the whole team along. And we found that those people are much more successful and a much better advantage for our shareholders to have people like that.
And any final advice you might have for our listeners and MBAs looking to enter the energy industry?
I think Constellation Energy is a tremendous opportunity. I think it's important to understand competitive markets versus non-competitive markets. So if you want to work for a pure utility or work for a competitive player like Constellation, I think one of the great things about our business, it's not going away. People are going to need energy forever. And so maybe the technology used to create that energy and how we get it to people and who demand it might change over time, but the energy industry is here to stay. And I think that's, maybe it provides some comfort to people that the skill sets that they're developing in that field will be useful throughout their career.
Well, great. Andrew, thank you so much for this. On behalf of the Smith Energy Club, we really appreciate your time and sharing with us a glimpse into Constellation.
Kristen, my pleasure.
And that concludes this podcast for University of Maryland Robert H. Smith School of Business Energy Club podcast series. Please stay tuned for future podcasts as we bring you the latest news from professionals in the industry.